At Rainmatter, we are super excited to partner with Fittr and you.
I don't think there was a single day in last 1 year where I took an off. I work out all 7 days a week. Average coach payout is around 1 lakh rupee. Top 20% of the coaches, they make upwards of 4 to 5 lakh rupees. 66% people today in the world are dying of NCDs, non-communicable diseases. People don't even know that there's a thing called founder's depression.
If you had to go out and do a workout with someone, who would that person be?
I really appreciate Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm a huge fan of Hrithik. In manifesting, I'll be beating him soon and possibly working out together.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. My guest today is Jitendra Chouksey, also known as JC. Came from a fairly unknown side of the country, turned himself into entrepreneur, fitness being his anchor. There's a lot to unpack and explore his other side. Let's get into the podcast. JC, thank you for taking time, coming all the way from Pune and having this conversation. There's a lot to talk to you, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
No, pleasure, man. We've known each other for quite some time. I think it was also a long time coming, so good to be here.
It is. So there's a lot to unpack, like I said. I want to start by asking probably the toughest thing. What was your workout for the day?
So I did some shadow boxing routine. And then I did my bodyweight training. So these days, you know that for the last 6 months, I'm more focused on bodyweight training. Yeah. So 3 sets of push-ups, pull-ups, lunges, and shoulder press.
Okay, so that's a heavy lifting stuff. So let's get into it. JC, you are a health educator. That's how I know you as your identity. Yeah. But you are also an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You are also a parent.
Yes.
Which has been the most satisfying identity for you?
Okay, so I think all 3 of them would probably, it's like I need my family for a different need, and I need my ability to educate people for a different need, and my entrepreneurial thing for a different need. They all satisfy different cravings in life.
So they all are satisfying?
Yes, extremely.
What has been the most challenging then? Which one of them has been more challenging?
I think all of them equally. Mm-hmm. And I think it's like nothing came easy. So, and this is something which I tell people all the time that, hey, be it your personal relationships, be it your finance, be it your personal health, or personal wealth, nothing comes easy. You have to keep working for it, and over a period of time it gets easier, right? So the same has been with me, my relationship with my wife, my daughter. Initially it was hard. Now it's like I tell everybody to get married. Whether they take my suggestion or not, different. Like because I'm in a happy place, you know. Then same thing with business, and same thing with like me as an educator. In the beginning, it was very conflicting and very frustrating at times. Where I had to tell people basic stuff, they wouldn't believe me. Now after 10 years, I think there's a certain set of people who appreciate what I do, and so it's become more fun.
So since you have multiple identities, I'll let you introduce yourself. Imagine you are in your daughter's school, Rachel's school. Yeah. You're in front of her classroom and you're asked to introduce to kids. Yeah. What is the introduction you're going to tell them, which we would use it as an introduction to the audience who are listening and watching? So what is JC as a person today who's going to introduce themselves?
I help people get fitter.
Great. Someone who helps people get fitter.
Yes.
So it's a very nuanced, goal to have in life. People are struggling to get fitter themselves. I have this firm belief, and I've followed this for most part of my life now, that we are architects of our own suffering and our own pleasure, right? What was the trigger point? And I think you've spoken this a lot in other mediums also, your challenging upbringing and so and so. But I particularly wanted to understand what was the trigger point where staying healthy and staying fit became your anchor to that life which you wanted to architect for yourself?
So I'd say multiple trigger points. First, this was primarily to stop getting bullied in school. I think that was when I was in class 8, right? Up until then, I was bullied in school every now and then. Plus, the small place where I come from, getting hit, getting thrashed by a bunch of boys was not very uncommon.
This is your hometown.
Right? So, I think in the beginning it was more towards just avoiding that bullying. Later on, I think it was for vanity reasons. So a lot of people don't know this, but there was a time when I lost almost 20 kgs just to be able to impress my crush. And it just so happened that, I lost 20 kgs. Then she
Tell me you married the same crush?
No.
No? Okay. Somewhere that crush is listening and probably regretting now.
Okay,
That you married to a better person.
No, I hope she's happy and married to somebody.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so then it was vanity. And then I think 2015 was a very bad incident which happened. My back, it got hurt pretty bad. And I've osteoarthritis since I was a kid. So I've always had back issues, and then it got worse. And doctor told me you'll have to go and get a surgery done. If you don't do it, you'll not be able to walk properly. And even after surgery, he said there might be complications. And after 10 years, you might have more problems. Or at some point, you might also have paralysis. Right? So the problem was so bad, but I did not have enough money. So I could not play with my daughter. And so I think that was one incident that made me realize that, hey, a good health is so important, right? I didn't go through the surgery, I didn't do anything. I just went through multiple episodes of rehab, did a lot of self-reading, and today I can do everything without needing any kind of surgery, right? So I think that, and then I also live with hepatitis B, which is again incurable.
Yeah.
So at some point of time, it will manifest into some sort of cirrhosis or liver cancer. So I keep by the way, right now my liver is pretty healthy except for the things which I elevated because of this. So I think I've learned to appreciate a good health through many such incidents in life. And I think, yeah.
So now that you shared a glimpse of a lot what people know mostly, what is the one thing which people don't know about you wish they knew?
No, I think the part where I lost 20 kgs to impress somebody for vanity reasons.
So that's a new truth bomb which you're telling everyone today. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny, but at the time it felt pretty sad.
When I was trying to read up more about you, something which was conflicting to me is that I know you since we've met few times, and professionally also we work together. But then I was constantly trying to understand that other side of yours so that I get a balanced view. And while trying to read up more about you, I read somewhere where you quoted, you have to embrace boredom and you have to embrace simplicity in life.
Yeah.
I want you to elaborate, what does that mean?
Well, I think a lot of people get stuck in life because they are constantly seeking different kind of pleasures. And historically, that has not worked well for them. You talk about the most rich and famous people. And having had the privilege to work with some of them, I know for a fact that not necessarily they are the happiest people. So happiness comes from simple things, and greatness comes from simple things, and you keep repeating it. So again, going back to the basics, whether it's personal relationship, health, wealth, social status, you just keep repeating the basics, and unless until you repeat the basics, there will come a time where it will become excruciatingly painful and boring. And that's when most of the people will stop. But if you keep doing it, it kind of becomes your identity, and that's who you become as a person. And then you are more content. So and again, my wife was not my soulmate, but I think I love her more than ever now. And she knows this. She acknowledges this, right? Similarly, when I started Fittr, I started it for a very different reason. And today that reason is somewhat different from the original reason, because at times it was excruciatingly painful. I would be lying if I told you that at no point of time I wanted to quit Fittr. There were numerous instances where I wanted to shut down Fittr and just live a normal life. I could have walked away from it, but today I'm doing it for a different reason, right? Same applies to what we were having a discussion about my social media, right? So I was able to figure out the algorithm. I could create videos which would generate millions of views, And then for my own sanity, I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get famous quickly. That's dangerous. The virality was causing more mental pain. And so I focused back on the nuanced, which I'm good at, aspect of my education, right? So it's about figuring out what you really want and then just repeating it. And if you just, there will come a point where the same things, if you repeat every day, that brings you same amount of happiness.
Is that, I want to talk to you about mental health, so, we'll dial on to that. But since you touched about the topic, is that an algorithm of life, that figuring out what you want and then keep repeating? Is because you said social media, you could figure it out. It's a algorithm which is written by someone and you can do experiments, but life doesn't get engineered by that. There's no definitive algorithm. You got to write your own algorithm, right? So is that what if someone asks you today life advice, is that an algorithm you may want to give it to them, like an open source algorithm that keep experimenting, and if you figure out what, repeat it?
Yeah, so again, it's not something which I've synthesized, right? I've followed people and I applied that to my life, and when it worked out, I just tell people the same thing. So you listen to WHO. WHO says that health is not just absence of a disease, but it's a state of physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being. I'm saying just add financial well-being also to it. So I'm saying if you want to focus on these 4 fundamental aspects, which is physical, mental, social, and financial well-being, you focus on them equally, I think your life will be much more meaningful. Today what's happening is people are either working on one aspect or the other aspect. And because I'm telling people this, I have to practice it. If I don't practice, I will not understand what are the pitfalls of this framework. So I'm constantly telling people about this framework. At the same time, I'm applying it, understanding, evaluating, going in depth of this framework, and then converting that into learnings which I can share with my people. Right? So a lot of it has come from applying this basic fundamentals which I took from WHO, modified a little bit, and then applying it, and then experiential knowledge which I'm sharing with people.
Yeah, calls for you to write a book on this, but since you wrote another book, I want to talk about that. You wrote a book called Lose Fat and Get Fitter.
Yes.
Right? Why lose fat? Why not lose weight?
Because you don't want to lose muscle mass or water or glycogen, which are all components of weight. You just want to lose fat.
Okay, so was it more very nuanced that you are asking people that focus on losing fat than body weight, or was it the name just sounded more picky for someone to go and read a book because people don't know how to lose fat?
So it was also kind of to poke fun at some of the books which talk about losing weight.
Mm-hmm. I thought so. But why do you think one should read that book?
I mean, if they want to understand a little bit about fitness and nutrition, I mean, so far the feedback that I've got, and it's an Amazon bestseller, right? Almost 20,000 plus copies have been sold, and this is despite the fact that I don't like advertising it. I always tell people to read my free book. The feedback has been amazing. A lot of people who have read the book, they've said that they did not know the things about fitness and nutrition and how simple it is as they did after reading my book, right? So one of the things I'd say is that it really simplifies fitness and nutrition for everybody. And whether you are a beginner or whether you are at a certain mid-level or even at advanced level, you will understand that if nothing, you'll learn how to simplify things.
Yeah. So you spoke about free book. So you're referring to the Get Shredded document, right? Yes. So what's not in that document which is there in this 200-page book?
I think it's more elaborate. A Get Shredded document is very, very concise, and it can still leave you with a lot of unanswered questions. It's just not. It basically talks about executional side of things, but does not necessarily answer the physiological aspects as well as Lose Fat, Get Fitter does. For example, in Get Shredded it says, hey, you can eat eggs, they are healthy, but then some people have questions. Aren't eggs bad for you because they increase cholesterol? So that answer you'll find in Lose Fat, Get Fitter, where I explain different kind of hormones and how dietary cholesterol does not affect your serum cholesterol levels, right? So it's a little more elaborative in that sense. Yeah.
So now that the identity is established, health educator who helps people get fitter. or perhaps get them to the fittest version of what would they want to be. Let's get into the trenches. Let's try to double click on JC on a normal day, right? So I'm more curious, and that's part of this conversation, mostly driven by my curiosity and people who now send in me questions to us, feed in my curiosity. What's typically your day routine? Because you're juggling in different identities, right? You have to educate, you have to take care of yourself, and between that, you're also running an enterprise, which is a hybrid between two. So, what's typically your day-to-day routine? And I specifically want to dial down on your physical fitness routine. So, how do you structure that?
Right. So I get up after completing my 8 hours to 9 hours of sleep, and then early morning. I usually used to have a pre-workout. Now I've stopped since 1 week, right? And then I'll go to the gym. I'll train hour and a half to 2 hours. We do our boxing training, and then we do our HIIT circuits and everything. And then I come back home, and me and my wife, we probably have lunch, and then Rachel is in school by then, right? Typically. And then I'll go to the office, I'll do my stuff, I come back home, me and my wife will go for a walk. Rachel will come home, I'll probably teach him piano. I will play we have 3 little dogs, so it's like a 24/7 drama non-stop.
Look, this is too ideal, too rosy life to live in. Like, I mean, you are having everything perfect in a world where people are struggling, stuck in traffic, swimming around email clogs. This is just too perfect, and even for me, it's too good to be true. So I want to get into the specifics. Like, did you get into this format now, knowing that there are things which you don't want to do? Are they very known to you, or you're very barbarian and clinical about these are things which are non-negotiable and I want to get them, and everything else which comes will follow it? What's typically the mental model?
So this is a routine which we have started following since we moved into a new house.
Okay. So this is a recent phenomenon.
It's a recent phenomenon.
Okay.
And none of this is untrue, by the way. This is exactly my routine. So yes, it might sound rosy and it might sound too good to be true, but I'm really grateful to God. This is exactly how the routine is.
Is it something which you have you have worked on yourself to get there, or did it come naturally?
Yes. No, worked very hard. I think when I married my wife in 2013, and we used to live in a 1 HK apartment in Bangalore, and I remember one time when I was coming back from office, so it's near Marathalli I used to stay. My bike got stuck in mud, and then it started raining. I was drenched, frustrated, like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm away from my parents, here in this place. I don't have enough money. I can't take care of my family, my wife, nobody. And so I just made a promise to myself, and then I shared that promise to my wife. Hey, every year, I'll make sure that our life gets better. So this is a promise that I still keep with my wife, and she'll tell you that I have stuck to that promise.
How do you measure the progress of your betterment?
No, everybody can see that. Like people on social media, people who have known me, people who are my personal friends, and my wife herself. She validated this fact that you have stuck to that promise. Our life has gone better over a period of time.
So when the days, I would imagine that there would be some days where things are not as rosy as how it is, right? They would be.
No, so
by the way, when I mean rosy, I mean it's too good for, at least for me, because I am still struggling, right? Yes. I have a 2.5-year-old at home. I want to go back and spend time, but there are days which I don't get time, right? I want to get up in the morning, I want to get my workout done, but there are days which I don't get.
Right.
So what I was trying to get through is that there are days where the variables are not in your control, right?
Yeah.
Even if you are driven, the external factors don't make you follow what is ideal for you, right? Yeah. That's one. And B, at the end of the day, we all are humans where we can also intrinsically get perhaps not that enough motivation. Even the extreme motivated people would also feel the days that it's just not going their way.
Yes.
Those days, do you let loose yourself to say, it's okay, not getting the workout, it's okay, I didn't get my walk with my partner, it's okay, I didn't play with my kid? Or do you, go extra vigilant on yourself, make an attempt, say, no, it's not okay, I should still go and get it done? What's the mental model?
Right. So there are some things which are non-compromisable. Right? For example, there's nothing in this world that can stop me from working out. Right? So I have to work out first thing in the morning. I don't think there was a single day in last 1 year where I took an off. I work out all 7 days a week. Even if I have to go and work out for 15 minutes, I'll do it. Right? So that's non-compromisable. Everybody in my family knows I stick to my diet. So nobody can force me to eat food that I don't want to eat. Right? So I'm very picky about that. But then another thing is I hate traveling. So unless until it is urgent, I don't travel. Right? And my house, my daughter's school, even my office, everything is very close by. So I was very, very specific right from the beginning. I'm not going to waste time in traffic because I've wasted too much time in 2 years when I was in Mumbai. Right? So everything is designed and planned in a certain manner. So I have a 5-year plan, I have a 10-year plan, I have a 50-year plan, right? So we keep discussing those plans together, me and my wife, right? So, and I think there's this fun element to it. And I think my wife is extremely supportive and understanding. Like, she's extremely simple, but she's simple to a point where you'd say she has attained enlightenment.
That's a great partner to have.
Yes, which means that she will never bother me for anything. It means that she'll never say, hey, today we are not walking, let's go for a walk. No, she'll understand. So I think I'm really grateful that I have a partner who kind of understands. So I think it's also how things are. And then this is a time of life which I feel is much more good. Business is doing well. We got funded by you guys. Before this, last 2 years were really sucky, right? We were losing money. We didn't have, I had thoughts of like whether we'd be able to pull through this or not. Right? So this is also a phase of life.
Yeah.
So this is, right now this is it. I don't know what's going to happen in future. We have plans, but you know how plans are.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. No. I mean, just to set the context, you spoke about funding. So at Rainmatter, we are very happy and super excited to partner with Fittr and you. Great institution what you're building. So yeah, we are super excited for what the future is and what you're going to do in help educate and help Indians get fitter. So that remains a great story to unfold. So how do you structure your training, right? And I say this in specific, like we were talking earlier, right? So I run marathons. So for me, most of my training is backward engineered to a certain race I have. So if I have a race in a particular, like at the beginning of the year, I would calendar my races and I would say, okay, these are my races. And then I would backtrack and say, okay, that's my training, right? But I know you don't run marathons, right? And that's something what we, someday I will convince you to run. But till that happens, for someone, and this is in largely coming from a point of view that I have generally seen two forms of physical training. One is sport-centric, where you make sport as a tool to stay fit, or that becomes an anchor to stay fit. So essentially you play any type of participative sports to stay fit. Or second is a typical exercise regime, right? I found the structure of training is defined basis on both, right? So for someone like you, how in your personal routine, how do you structure your training? Like how do you define that this is a phase of training? How do you periodize your training?
Right, so like you rightly said, so I fall in the former category where I anchor my training around a sport. So since I was a kid, I was fond of boxing, right? And I did try to attempt boxing when I was in college, third year, and then we had a sparring match and somebody knocked me out. Out of shame, out of embarrassment, I never continued. Then luckily I was at a place in life where I was comfortable. I could seek boxing training again, right? So 5 years back we started this. COVID happened, a lot of self-learning, and for the last 2 years I've been doing it very seriously with a national boxing coach. Right, so I think boxing is my anchor, and now most of my training is anchored around boxing. Having said that, I also take extra care of my health because of my underlying illness and the incident which happened, right? So I'm extremely, extremely cautious about that. And I want to, like in general, live a healthy, long life, right? So it's also part of my, so I'm studying gerontology now, which is the science of aging and longevity, right? So I also want to kind of form some solid hypothesis around what I've been doing, what more I could do, the stuff that we were discussing when we were eating food, and then if I can teach the same to people, right? So a lot of my training is experimental, anchored by boxing, anchored by my past experience, right?
So you and me, one common thing other than the fact that I run, I don't lift as much, you don't run but you lift more, but other than the fact we both have sport as an anchor,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Do you feel it's important, or it helps people to make sport as an anchoring tool for them to staying fitness? Because there are two forms of staying fitness, like I said, else you walk into the gym, lift weight, exercise. My pet peeve on that format has been that you just can't measure progress.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you're lifting, you're getting definition, but there's no progress, right? So in these two formats, what do you would recommend today? And because you're also an educator, you're helping people stay fit. What should one think should work for them, or more importantly, how should one figure out what is more ideal format for them?
Right. So one should do sports not because of physical reasons. One should do sports because sports teach you so much more than just physical fitness. Sports teach you essence of life. For example, a very simple line from my coach: hey, always be on the toes, be on guard, because the minute you drop your guard, somebody will knock you out. And that's exactly how life is. So in a similar manner, I'm sure, and like people say, life is not a short sprint, it's a long marathon, right? So I'm saying a lot of these amazing quotes come from sports because sports mimic life. There's so much of unpredictability and so much of preparation that goes in. It's just like you prepare for a sport, you prepare and plan for life. So I believe that sports is not just about physicality. It's not just about being the fastest, leanest, meanest, or the most flexible or the fastest version of you. It's also about learning how to live your life in a certain manner, right? So I think that's why I believe that sports should be looked at as something different. Having said that, sports also have a lot of injuries, right? Some of the most nastiest injuries. I mean, boxing, people die, right? So people need to dissociate sports from health in a way that you need to be healthy to be able to play a particular sport. Sport in themselves are not going to make you fit. And that's where most of the people go wrong, because they think, hey, I'm playing a sport, I don't need to exercise. No, you need to exercise more, because chances of you getting injured are far more compared to a guy who's not playing any sport, right? So this is one thing that a lot of people don't understand. If they do understand this, I'd say everybody should play a sport. Everybody should play a sport.
Changing gears from physical health, what's your definition of mental health? What does mental health mean to you?
I think mental health for me personally is when you can keep doing the same stuff over a period of time for no reason, without having to constantly look for motivation or a specific. For example, when I get up every day in the morning, I don't have these questions anymore. Why should I train? I just train. Just like how when I wake up in the morning, I just brush my teeth. I don't ask myself, why am I brushing my teeth? So I believe when everything becomes a habit, and here's the fun part, happiness is not something which is like somewhere out there. If you decide that you want to be a happy person, you can be a happy person. So being happy is also a habit.
So being happy without a reason.
Being happy without a reason. So I think when you stop looking for reasons to do your daily chores, including staying happy, that's a good state of mind to be in.
So then what's your toolkit for having a mental health? Because I mean, there's a toolkit to have a physical health, right? I mean, sports, exercise training, whatever format of training you do. What's your toolkit for mental health?
You just practice it.
How do you execute that? I mean, it's a very how do I say that, Zen-based feeling to say that you are trying to be happy for no reason, but there's an evolution, there's a small milestone, and you to get there. So what are small things which has worked for you, which you kind of assemble in your toolkit and you carry everywhere? That just like I have a pair of resistant band which I take everywhere for my physical health, that's a toolkit I carry everywhere for my mental health.
I think being grateful and knowing what makes people happy, and then seeing if you have those things, it's like putting on a checkbox. I see people who always talk about how they wish they had parents, alive because they lost their parents because when they were kids, and they'd say, hey, I'd give anything to get my parents back. And I'm like, I have both my parents and they are without any issues. That should make me happy. And then people are like, oh, I can't have kids, because of this issue or that issue. I wish I had a kid. And I'm like, I have a kid. People like, I don't have enough money. I wish I had money to afford a home. I live in a beautiful home. I don't have a home loan, right? So that's a tick. So and again, I don't necessarily mean that everybody can do this because I'm at a privileged place now. I'm 100% aware that I'm more privileged than a lot of people. And when I was not so privileged, I've come from a very poor family background, right? So when I was not privileged, these are the things that I wanted. And I felt that these things will make me happy. So now I have those things. If somebody like me can't stay happy, then that's cruelty. And that's like laughing in the face of everybody. And like, hey. So I'm saying, no matter what problems I have today, they'll never be bigger than somebody who does not have these things. And knowing this, it kind of, I just feel happy.
So a lot of these things, what we do, just to combine both this aspect of physical health and mental health, we are trying to improve ourselves as a human being.
Yes.
And we are constantly trying to unlearn and learn,
yes.
right? And as we try to constantly learn and unlearn ourselves, we are trying to educate ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And something what we were discussing when we were having lunch together was also the nuance of knowing whether you are learning by yourself or you are letting someone else teach you, or you're learning from someone else. That's where this importance of coach comes in.
Yes.
Now you are at a vantage point where we'll get into the business of Fittr, but you help create coaches, or you help make coaches. At the same time, you also have a coach for yourself.
Yes.
You are also a coach to few people.
Yes.
Right? In that experience, from that realm, whether it's mental health or physical health, how do you think, what lens should one apply to go out and say that, how do I hire a coach? What metrics very few measurable metrics, what has worked for you, that this is how I'm going to evaluate when I hire a coach.
Right.
Second, when should one think about hiring a coach? Because we were discussing this, right?
Yes.
I mean, when you become very nuanced about a topic, you become a student of the subject. And that also overwhelms you. And then it becomes very hard for you to draw a balance between, I know too much of it and therefore I am good to self-coach myself, or I should let and surrender myself on someone else so that they can, coach me. So two-part, one, what lens should I apply when I'm trying to hire coach? B, what makes me at what point decide that I should hire a coach?
Look, if you can afford a coach, it's always good to have a coach. Okay, so I don't think there's any kind of I don't think there's any disagreement there that one must always have a coach. That's why we have teachers in school. I mean, sure, you can go to school and learn from teachers, or you can go on YouTube and self-learn. But the reason why you go to school is because the teachers kind of make it easier for you to learn. And then there's the whole student and, that setting that helps. In a similar manner, I think no matter how motivated you are, no matter how skilled you are, to be able to do something on a daily basis without any sort of a coach kind of becomes a chore. There comes a point in life when you have done that stuff under a coach for 20 odd years, where you have reached a level where you say, hey, okay, my coach is not there, I can do it without him. But I think that usually comes very late in people's life. Sometimes, habits, especially if they make you feel uncomfortable, they take a very long time to build into yourself. For example, if I did my HIIT training today, probably the intensity is maybe 90%. If my coach was here, he'd make sure that I do it at 150%, right? So there's a visible difference between how I perform when I'm with my coach versus when I'm on my own. People would say, hey, 90% isn't bad, but I can't sustain this for more than 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, my performance will keep going down. From 90%, it'll be down to like 70%, 60%. With my coach, it was already at 150%. And some point, at some time, it could have gone to 200% of what I'm doing, right? So back to the same thing. Now, how do you filter or how do you decide what kind of coach do you want? So look, I'm not a boxing champion. I had sparrings, had basic elementary training at Muay Thai, but I haven't boxed in a ring. And my coach, he's a national champ, right? He has boxed more people. He has knocked out more people than me. So he clearly understands the business of boxing, the art of boxing. And so when I see him in his flow, you see him do a shadow boxing routine, and you're like, okay, this is the level I want to be. I'm not at that level. So that's my.
So beyond credentials, let's say so I just want to kind of generalize it beyond sports, because a lot what you do is also not very specific to the solution. That is, for example, nutrition, I feel is more of an education problem.
Yeah.
Because you are helping people understand first principles, what is right and wrong, and rather telling them you should eat this. Because if you tell them this is how first principle food should be looked at, you empower them for the lifetime rather than for a month or 6 months, right? So it's an education problem.
It's an education problem.
So when you look at from that point of view, the filter goes beyond credential, right? Sports in particular, one could imagine someone has played at a certain level, or they have some certification or credibility, right? But if you apply it in a general canvas, right? What do you think that lens should be, where it is beyond credential or certification, and it is larger than life?
Well, I think in general, anybody can dispense generic advice. If it's coming from a point where it does not have any logical flaws, there's a saying that don't shoot the messenger. So if the message is right, if you apply it from all logical, if it meets all the logical criteria, then I think it's worth listening to somebody, right? And does not have to have any kind of credentials for that. If somebody says, hey, carbohydrates have 4 calories, but they don't necessarily have 4 calories, it's an overgeneralization which we adopted from Atwater system. In general, carbohydrates can have maybe 3 calories, or 5, or maybe even 6 calories, right? Or might not provide any calories at all, because most of it's just indigestible fiber, it'll flush out with your system. I'm like, okay, makes sense, right? And I will not ask you what your qualification is, whether you're a doctor, you're a non-doctor, but what you've said is something which can be validated, right? So I think if somebody is there who's saying something, and what he's saying or she's saying can be validated over a period of time, then I think that's one way you can filter out people if they're genuine enough or not.
Since you dabbled in multiple skills, my curiosity is, so boxing, you said 5 years back you renewed your interest in boxing. I remember some time back you had also said you picked up guitar as a new skill. How do you choose what skill to learn, a new skill? What's the mental model around in figuring it out that this is the new skill you want to pick and learn?
So guitar was something which was like music for my, just for my soul, right? It was just like, if me, so during COVID, and I'm usually a paranoid person. Not in a bad way, but I'm just extra overprotective, so I do things which most of the people wouldn't go. In future, if you see me building a nuclear bunker, don't get surprised, so I am one of those paranoid guys. And so I'm overprotective about my family also. So during COVID, I felt that my family would be more safe with my family. And at the time, there was a time where initially when the COVID fear set in and people were stealing toilet papers and stuff, right? So I said, why don't you guys go and stay with the family? And unfortunately for 3 months, I could not be in touch with them. And I was staying all by myself, alone. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I started cooking. I started learning how to plant. And then I started learning guitar. So that's where it happened, right? So it was more like, if I'm alone, what do? I need something. I can't meditate. I have a working mind. So I can't sit in peace and do nothing. I have to do something. So guitar was it.
So it's more intrinsic driven. That's what you're saying, that internally you're trying to make that skill fill a certain void, which makes you, try to settle down. Like you said, family was not there, so you want.
Yeah. So the origins can be always tracked back to my childhood. When I was a kid, I wanted my dad to buy me a guitar because it was cool. My classmates were playing guitar, and I was from a small town, right? My dad sent me to a class where they taught music, but the teacher didn't know music. He knew tabla and he knew harmonium, right? So instead I learned harmonium, but I never wanted to play harmonium. And then as I grew up, I was like, okay, now I can afford a guitar, might as well buy it. Bought it and then started playing it, sucked at it. And then COVID was a perfect time for me to learn it. Okay. So I watched videos, learned it, and now I'm pretty good at it. So.
Okay, JC. So moving beyond the identity, entrepreneurship, another facet of your life.
Yeah.
So you're an entrepreneur, founder, CEO of Fittr. In simple words, what do Fittr do? What's the business model?
Okay, for lack of better words, it makes people fitter.
Right. How do you do that? How's the business? How do you make money?
Right. So our business is extremely simple. If I have to explain it to you, it's a freemium model, but we internalize it, use a reference of a mango tree. So for example, a mango tree, it represents the community, right? And the fruits of knowledge, they grow on the tree, right? Everybody is free to go and pick the fruits. And out of those hundreds of people who are picking the fruits without any concern, some people will go and put some water into the tree. And that way the tree grows, more fruits come, more people water. That's our business model. So out of all the people who are taking free knowledge from the community, a few of them come, enroll with the coaches because they like the information that the coaches are sharing. And when they enroll with the coaches, we take a commission out of that. And that's how company makes money. That's how we create employment. The community goes big. People are enjoying the fruit, the tree is growing, and so far it has worked well for us.
Yeah, so you have been growing well. You are, and as a company, last I read, your revenues are to the north of 100 crore plus,
yes.
Right? To me, it has always felt that Fittr is an education first company and then a nutrition and a fitness coaching company.
Yes.
And I feel that's a moat for a company like yours, right? Do you think that that's your moat, or do you think there's something else? What is Fittr stands for, which perhaps many people don't know?
So it was more of an educational body before it became a company. The whole idea of Fittr was basically me telling people how to get fit, and that was without any kind of without any idea that someday this will become such a large company. I recall briefly in 2013 when I was just preparing for my own fitness model competition, and a guy came to the gym and he asked me if I do something as in do I take steroids or drugs, and it felt insulting but at the same time I understood that hey, I know something that this guy does not know. So I started training the guy and he built six-pack abs. He was working out for I think 5 or 6 years. His diet supposedly was good, but he was not able to lose that last layer of fat. So I helped him. 3 months he had six-pack abs, right? So I think this is when it all started. And then created a small WhatsApp group where people from all over the world joined it. I started training them. And at the point, it was more to prove to people that, hey, you can naturally build muscles, because I was kind of trying to justify. Because when somebody said, hey, this cannot be natural. And I was posting my pictures on social media. Every other comment was, this is not natural, must have taken something, right? So more in an attempt to prove people that, hey, this is natural, I'll do the best thing for you. I'll train you, and then you can tell people if this is natural or not. So I was training people and naturally helping them build muscles. And I think it had a very positive effect on me. And then I realized, okay, maybe, I'm capable of doing much more than just sitting behind a computer and working for some client. I don't know who's doing what or what kind of impact it's making. Right, so I've been doing that since 2013, and I've been educating people. Along the way, when we moved from WhatsApp group to Facebook group, and then I started conducting seminars, the strong demand came. Hey, JC, why don't you train us and we'll pay you money? Up until now, I was teaching people for free, right? And then I realized that I can't possibly train hundreds of thousands of people. I found this challenge pretty exciting, and I said, hey, if I can educate people who can then coach people, that way you can create jobs, and then you can also make much more number of people fit, right? So that's where the idea came in. And of course, if we had to scale, we had to become like an enterprise because, okay, let's not get into the controversial side of things, but I've always believed that this country needs more business than it needs charities.
Yeah.
No offense to charities. India has already 32 lakh charities, but not as many businesses or not even as many schools, right? So this is something I'm extremely vocal about. I feel that when you build a business, you solve a problem and then you employ people, right? So it just became a business, but the ethics, the idea remained on very, it was a very humane idea, right? So we don't sell products, we don't gimmick people. And I said, look, what are some of the biggest problems in health and fitness industry? The biggest problem was lack of awareness. The reason why people buy bad stuff and then regret later on is because nobody told them it's bad. Because every company is out there saying, hey, you drink this, it will boost your testosterone levels, it will boost your immunity, all sorts of crap. So we started educating people. We are education first company.
Yeah, so I think the anchors of a company like yours is when you educate, you also build a community, right? So what are the first principles in terms of making the user first and continuously becoming a community driven platform or a company? Like for a lot of people, community is a feature. For you, I feel community is the product.
Yeah.
Right? People come for the community, right? And they hang in there, they get education, and then they decide if they may want to have a personal coach or not, right? And therefore you make money out of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of new age businesses, they throw in some growth hackers, they throw in some marketing people, they try to create a WhatsApp group or a Discord group just to hype it off as a feature, right?
Yeah.
So what has worked for you, or rather, what are you constantly working to keep the user as a primary aspect in building that community? Because it's not hard as you scale. I think last I read you have over 6 million users across all your platforms, right? Yes. So what do you do constantly to maintain that priority for the...
I think, so a lot of stuff that we do, and personally I do, can be tracked back to my own past, right? So the main reason why we created a community was because I personally wanted a community. As a kid, I had zero support when I was on my fitness journey, right? A lot of people body shame you, a lot of people say stuff which is mean, and instead of trying to help you and support you, they just make you feel worse. And I think creating this Fittr community was for me a way to find that love and support. And I said, hey, this is what I wanted. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who are like me when I was a kid, and they want this now. And that worked like magic, because everybody has problems and everybody is probably somewhere wrong, but they don't want to constantly hear that. They want to know, hey, it's going to be okay, and you're just trying, you'll fail, but you'll succeed, right? So positive community is important, not just community. Hundreds of thousands of communities. I'm pretty confident to say that Fittr is the most inspiring and most supportive community in the world. I think I can confidently say that. You go to Fittr community, the minute you disrespect somebody, you're out. So we don't tolerate any sort of nuisance in the community, right? So it's an extremely positive, extremely supportive community. And I feel that community adds on to everything what we do. Because if you go into layers of fitness and health related problems, why are people constantly getting unhealthier? Is it the people around them? Have they stopped playing less? Have they started drinking or smoking? Have they started eating crap? Who are influencing these decisions? If it's the people around them, then we need to fix those people around them, right? I can't build an offline community and tell people to leave their parents and stay with a bodybuilder or people who are into health and fitness, but I can build an online community where most of the people spend time interacting with these folks online, right? So that's our way of fixing a problem which is much more deep-rooted. See, education is one problem. Even if I give you education, even if you get the diet plan and training plan, you will not follow it. People around you will not let you follow it.
Yeah.
You need a community for that.
Yeah, I think, I agree, I completely agree, because one thing which I've also seen is that because we are social animals,
yes,
a lot of what we have to do in terms of consistency also comes from people around us, right? So, motivation and inspiration is in abundance today, right? It's too much, it's overflowing, right? But discipline and consistency is in scarce, right? You don't have that enough. And to maintain that, no matter how much intrinsically motivated you are, as we were saying, speaking in the beginning part, people around you build that, the sphere.
Yes.
So and they contribute to your consistency. So it's very important to surround yourself. And therefore, for some people, it could be the offline community, people who are, lucky to have a family like that, or you need to find an online community, right? So I think, and I've seen that. I'm a very silent member of that community, and I usually come to, I rarely check Facebook, but whenever I do, I see, Fittr on part of my feed, and sometimes it takes me back when I see someone. Last when I saw someone from Pakistan had a user from Pakistan has said, "I am a Pakistani and can I enroll with a Fittr coach here? Is it doable?" Right? And I saw over 500, 600 people commenting, and someone else saying, "I'm already from Pakistan and I'm already from UAE, and you can, I am there to help you." And most of the time, I think what and I want to tell the audience watching and listening, with no vested interest, I find the fabric of the communication in the community to be very genuine, where they are not selling something. So is that a protocol which has been ingested by you or others from the starting, or it is how it has evolved? Because no one at the first point, when someone says, "I want to lose weight," no one jumps in to say, "Hey, these are my services." You are trying to understand the first world problem, from first principles, that this is how you should think. So you're re-educating, right? So how does that fabric gets built? I mean, because no one is selling anything there.
Yeah, so I think it is a culture that we have built in the company that, hey, we are not going to sell stuff. And even our coaches are not allowed to post their services or about their client transformations in Fittr, because humans are inherently, not everybody I'd say, but most of the people just think very short term, right? If you start posting your transformations, your whole intent is how many people are buying my services. And then the level of stuff that you post becomes degraded over a period of time. And then the community, which once used to have a lot of value, now starts losing the value, which means that, hey, over a period of time, the people who trusted you, now they start losing trust in you, right? So how do you maintain this constant flow of trust from people? By not selling them stuff. Let them make the decision on their own. You just provide the value. The trust part always comes later, right? So it's a culture which we have built. It was very difficult for me to convince people initially that this is how it should be. We wanted to build a company in a specific manner. If we had not built the company in a specific manner, I don't think we would have come this far. And it was very difficult to convince people in the beginning. But now I think more or less everybody's kind of on board that this is the right way. So we don't do any of that selling stuff. If we educate enough people and people see that you're genuine, people will come and enroll with you.
So trust is a very expensive currency. It's very hard to build it. You cannot buy it, right? And it comes with its own time. A company also has to grow. So it's a conundrum that you're built on trust. You cannot buy it. You can't throw money to acquire it. But at the same time, as an enterprise, you also have to grow, right? So if trust becomes your go-to anchor, right? How do you find that balance that you have to be fair to your customers in what is good for them, not to sell them, but at the same time grow as a company? Because now you're beyond a self-funded company. You're a venture-funded company. So there are investors on your cap table. So as an entrepreneur, how are you driving that amongst your team? How do you draw the balance?
Yeah, I think just like it was initially very difficult for me to convince my own people, it was very difficult to convince the investors that we have to build this company in a certain manner. But I think after having spent enough time with me, they know that my heart is in the right place. And the company will eventually become what they expect it to become. But let's not do all sorts of wrong stuff to do that. And thankfully, what happened in 2021, 2022, the valuations came crushing down. I think that also was kind of a gentle nudge for those investors to, start looking at businesses from a different lens and start recognizing the immense power of communities. Right? So we were ahead of our time, when we did no marketing. And I think the only parallel I saw at the time was Zerodha. And I constantly, feel that at some point of time, we would become as big as Zerodha in the future. I mean, Zerodha is doing it much, much better in a shorter period of time because they cater to a much more, the need of wealth right now is far more than the need of health.
Yeah.
But you see, health and wealth are undeniably both important and needed. It's just a matter of time. So just like right now, there's a more need for wealth in the minds of people, there will come a time where people will be wealthy, but they'll need health, right? So our time will come. And when that time comes, how many people are genuine enough in the market? I feel we'd be there and people will be able to look and track back that, look, these guys have had their fair share of challenges, but they didn't budge, they didn't move from that path. And today, if I have to go and enroll with somebody, there's one company that I can trust blindly, it's these guys.
Yeah.
And I'd say it has definitely caused a lot of mental agony, a lot of loss of opportunities. Like we never got into supplements. It's an easy business for us. We can monetize so hard from supplements. It's like we can easily add like 100, 200 crores additionally from just selling supplements to our customers because they anyways go ahead and buy supplements, right? And I get this all the time, left and right from everybody. But I just feel like that, hey, we are not building a company for the sake of making money. I'm building this company for my kids. And I think we are also building this company for our future generations. And no matter how much money we make, that money is not going to justify if this company becomes a company that kind of loses its vision, which is primarily to educate people. I've seen companies losing vision. Everybody who comes out and says, I'm going to do good, eventually they lost track and they stop being a force for good. I'd admit that there was a time where we were also losing track. But I'm so glad that we are back on track. I don't want to lose track again. Very firm, very focused on what we have to do now.
So company, you're a 10-year-old company now, a company which has crossed a top line of 100 crore plus.
8 years old. Yeah.
8 years?
8 years.
Okay. Closing to 10 year, let's say. A top line of 100 crore plus and growing at a very good margin. What is your current vision statement when you talk to your employees, your coaches, your community? Why is Fittr relevant today?
I think what we are building is extremely important. If you look at health and wellness scenario, and not many people are educating people. Most people are selling their services, and it's just very difficult for customers to pick from one to another or differentiate from one to another. So most of the people are rushing at the opportunity to sell something. We are basically cautioning people. So it's more like a duty, more like a responsibility. And by doing so, we are also growing. We are not probably growing at very healthy margins of, let's say, 100 to 100%. We are probably growing at 15, 20%. Maybe in future, we'll grow at 30%. I think everybody has been convinced internally and externally. So our investors have convinced them that, hey, look, if you want to really wait for the next 10, 20 years when we become a massive company, good. Otherwise, we'll figure out a way for you to have a happy and healthy exit. So I'm very convinced, and like internally, I'm very convinced that, hey, we have to build this company out for next 10, 20 years because it is going to be super important. It's important for us to build this company because the future of health and wellness, it looks very, very bad.
So, two extension to that. One, as a health educator, because you are seeing there's a massive opportunity of educating and helping people, and also as an entrepreneur. Yeah. First, the former, someone who wants to build a career in health as a coach, helping others. Yeah. What is your advice to them?
If you're genuinely passionate about helping people, there's no better job for you today. It's a very satisfying job. It's also very mentally taxing unless until you have your ABCs in check and unless until you follow a certain rule book, which is a physical, mental, social, and financial well-being. it can be very taxing, right? It's very depressing also at times because you absorb a lot of people's problems. It's like you work almost like a friend, a physiotherapist, a psychotherapist, and then as sometimes even as a like a low-level doctor, and then of course as a fitness and nutrition coach. So it's a very tough job, but if you're really, really passionate, then it's very, very satisfying also, because you wake up every day and then you're like, okay, what am I doing? You're like, I'm doing something good, I'm changing lives. And the kind of messages that you get from people, the kind of emails that you get from people, those loving messages, I think there's no price you can put. Like if you sold somebody a soap, nobody's gonna come to you and say, hey, you know what, I've used your soap and it changed my life. You never hear that.
But do you think is it financially also rewarding? Because
it is very financially rewarding.
The old adage is that an average fitness trainer in India would typically earn 15, 20, 25, 30 grand.
And that
right?
is absolutely not true about Fittr coaches at all. So across all coaches, I wouldn't talk about the median because that depends on how good or bad a coach is, but average coach payout is around 1 lakh rupee.
Okay.
Top 20% of the coaches, they make upwards of 4 to 5 lakh rupees a month.
And how many coaches you have on the platform now?
Roughly 500.
Okay. As an entrepreneur,
Yes.
Advice to people who want to solve for health problems in India, right? Like the one you're solving.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will agree to me that there cannot be just one health company in India. India has a massive health problem, and there's an opportunity for, if not 100, but at least 50 odd health companies because of the sheer size and the density of problems you have.
Yeah.
So for people who are constantly thinking about solving health problems in India, what is the advice you have for them in building for health, healthcare solutions in India?
I'd say first observe the problems. If the problems are coming from a deep personal space, that's even better, because then you have your personal skin in the game and you're really passionate about solving that problem. If I wasn't fat, I wouldn't care about getting fit, and then I wouldn't worry about making other people fit, right? So it was a deep personal problem for me. Second part is figuring out exactly what problem you're going to solve. And so for that, you have to understand the problem first. The problem is multi-layer. Okay? Lack of education, awareness, that's one problem. Lack of food choices, another problem. Convenience of getting healthy food, another problem. Then you talk about the company that people are surrounded with, right? That's another problem. Trackability, accountability, motivation, discipline is a very multifaceted problem, and you have to figure out ways in which you can actually solve these problems in a way somebody else is not solving. Because you can't suddenly build a company, hey, I have coaches who will chase you and beat you up if you don't do your workout, and so we are solving for discipline. No, your company will not work. Right? So you have to find a way where people can say, you know what, maybe this works for me, and try it out on a small group of, let's say, 100 people, and take out your PMS survey, find out if it's really helping. If the solution is good enough, then go ahead, build for maybe a beachhead market, and then probably scale it up. Don't worry about TAM. The TAM is large enough. The problem with health and fitness and TAM is that, you'll never be ready enough for the TAM. The crowd will be ready enough for you the minute you solve that problem in a more effective manner, because health and fitness has a very, very big TAM.
And you're also in a way creating a TAM.
You are
because
creating.
consumers don't know what better in their life is ahead of them unless someone teaches them how they can be, right? So in
health
a way,
and wealth, they have an infinite time, infinite TAM. Only challenge is like, are you the company that they can come to?
A common thing which, something we've spoken offline also, and I want you to, share your thoughts here also, is that founder depression, right? Everyone goes through it. No one talks about it.
Yes.
In your experiences, having gone through it, what are the things which has worked for you to combat it and come out of it? Right.
So I know nobody talks about it, but luckily I've been talking about it. I'm extremely vocal about founders' depression. I think it's horrible. The things that founders go through, and unfortunately founders don't usually get into company of other founders, because usually what they think of every other founder as a threat, or they think that other founders are out there to take their piece of the pie, which I found to be totally untrue. And so before we get into the solution, I'm extremely on good terms with my competitors. I know them, like we talk all the time. right? So I think one of the things that people need to do is that keep professional differences aside, keep competition aside, get into talking to your competitors. It's perfectly fine. Discuss common problems. For example, one of the problems that we discussed with Tushar and me was how bad performance marketing really is for our businesses, right? The CAC doesn't work out, right?
And Tushar here, just so that people know, is founder CEO of Healthify Me.
Healthify Me. Yeah. He's a pretty nice guy, right? And think about it, like we have so many commonalities. He was obese, and then because of an incident, he started getting into health and fitness, same as me. So we have more common, right? Similarly, so that's one of the things that you should do. You should talk to your competitors. You should, more importantly, talk to founders, because founders are the only ones who can probably understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
And if they are from the same domain, they probably also understand how tough or easy the market is, right? So that's also another thing. Friends and family. When you are in depression, I think close friends and family members are extremely, extremely crucial. They understand what you're going through, and a lot of people might not understand that. Get into a hobby, get into a sport. I think that also keeps your mind occupied and you don't get bad thoughts. But I think out of all the things, the thing that worked for me personally was just getting into company of other founders, realizing that they also go through the same thing. Just knowing that founders' depression is not an isolated incident, it happens with everybody. Until that time, I did not know what I was suffering was from founders' depression.
Yeah.
So people don't even know that there's a thing called founders' depression. People also don't know that founders are 3 times more likely to get depressed and more likely to have issues, suicidal thoughts than an average individual, right? So statistically, founders also are more prone to committing suicide and have depressive thoughts. So I think just knowing the stats and knowing when you are hitting that that kind of zone, that space where you start having those negative feelings, super important for you to talk to a therapist or just talk to other founders.
So WHO says that we are living in a world where we are marred with infodemic, right? Where there is a surge of information which is fake and ingenuine.
Yeah.
And there's a thin line between someone who is trying to educate and someone who on that progression becomes an influencer.
Yeah.
Right? And you and me very well know we either follow a health educator or are getting influenced by someone who is putting short form content, long form content.
Yeah.
My question to you specifically is that how does an average person figure it out what is genuine and what is not genuine when he is exposed to such content?
I think that's a very good question. It's also a question that probably needs a much more it probably needs a more learned answer than from someone like me. I really don't have any idea, because today, no matter, you either compromise on the quality of the content or you just do something which is not factually correct. Unfortunately, that's how it's working. And the more you shout, the more you scream, the more you're likely to get attention. And what happens is that today we also live in a world where people don't give any kind of regards to your past track record. You're as good as your last reel, as your last piece of content, and people tend to forget everything, right? So I think you and I, we come from a time where we're all about building a track record and hoping that in 10 years' time, somebody will look at their track record and they'll say, hey, this guy seems good. I don't think we live in that time anymore. Today, people will put you on a pedestal because your last reel was good and put you down, thrash you because your last reel was bad, irrespective of what you have done in the last 10 years, right? So it's evolution, but not necessarily healthy, because people are focusing on everything in short term. So they don't have time to look into details of a person's pedigree, what he has done, what he has built. They're just evaluating that person quickly. Yeah. Right? So when people are evaluating everything very quickly, it's very challenging. I don't have any answer to this question.
Yeah, and I'm kind of double clicking on this is because we've been discussing this also separately, that the times where we live, even if we have the resistance, but we are continuously being exposed to such content, right? And it becomes very hard because everyone doesn't come from a scientific temperament, right? And there is an protagonist for each type of a person, right? I mean, we have multiple types of platforms today, short form, long form, text-based, visual-based. So someone starts with the intent of being a health educator, but they may not know, but they're actually influencing someone. And someone starts with the intent of being an influencer because they have a vested interest eventually to leverage and capitalize that audience what they have created, right? And we also live in a time where we all are vulnerable peoples, right? We are a billion plus population of vulnerable and gullible people. It's just easy to sell someone on the guise that this will help you lose weight or this will help you gain muscles, and therefore it becomes a very dangerous situation. And I say it both sides because there might be some people who are doing genuinely good work in educating, but then there's someone who is taking others for a ride. So there has to be some mechanism or some internal heuristic what an average person can create who doesn't come from, like I said, that very nuanced background to listen someone or read something and say, this can be squashed as quackery or pseudoscience. So in your experience, you are a health educator. I've seen your content. You are trying to put forward things in a very simplified way. And there are many who are trying to do it in their own capacity, either through a long form content podcast or short form content reels. What do you think has helped your community and people who ask you questions to help them filter that what is right or wrong?
I think instead of just telling people straight away yes or no, I focus more on empowering people, where I empower them and I encourage them to ask questions. So there's this famous saying in the Fittr community that imagine, like, if somebody doesn't answer the question, I'm a role model for them because I've answered simplest of the simplest questions maybe 1,000,000 times, and even now I do it. And a lot of coaches ask me, JC, why do you keep answering the same questions over and over again? Can't you put them in an FAQ? Can't you put them in animation videos? Can't you put them in podcasts or something? I said, trust me what? I've done all of this. And yet people come and ask questions. We have AI, we have everything. But still, if you ask me a question, without getting frustrated, I'll answer the most basic questions. Because I think when you stop people from asking questions, you kind of kill their motivation or their zeal to know more, right? But if you answer the questions, and if you answer a question that encourages them to ask more questions, I think people become generally more inquisitive, more smart, and then then people can't take them for a ride. So my way of answering question is also to encourage people to question more, and if they question more, they automatically become more empowered and they learn, right? So I think that's something that we have done. Fittr community is built on people asking questions and we answering their questions, no matter how preliminary, how repeated the question is, right? Another thing I think we have done is, what we have done is that if somebody, after asking a question, wants to build on top of this, then there has to be a structured programming to it. And we have built that structure on top of it, right? So there's levels of how much we allow people to learn. And then INFS is the next level, where we have 26 professional courses. So if you come to us and you ask a question, not only will you get answer to that question, you can go 100 levels up. And if you ask that question, you'll get answer to those questions as well. So basically Fittr is a one-stop shop for all your health and fitness questions.
So INFS, just to give context, is the educational arm of
Fittr.
The business where you run courses and you run programs in giving people the academic rigor to nutrition and fitness, right? All right. The learning process in India, specifically in health, I realize is even more tricky. And since the time I have become more curious about the subject, I've realized that everything around health and nutrition, unlike any other topic in life, in India specifically, has a religious connotation, it has a cultural connotation, sometimes it also has a political connotation, right? That you are supposed to, because people can literally drive you as a tribe because they want you to do what they do, right? And therefore, we often find ourselves in a confused state of mind that what is right or wrong. As simple as, in many cultures, there's a traditional concept: when you wake up, you should do this, you should drink that, you should eat this. By after evening, you cannot do this. So there's a lot of concept. Now these are not scientifically proven. There's no scientific evidence to it. So there are multiple school of thoughts, right? As a country, as a society, I want to believe that we are moving to an ecosystem where there is more scientific temperament which is getting built. But it is not as much as what ideally we would want to, because a country is huge, right? Where do you think people who are building these temperaments, how can they help squash these aspects of quackery or pseudoscience in others? How can they distill it? Because not everyone is accessing, let's say, the education what you are giving. It is not really going to the corners of billion people, right? And it's very hard to unlearn and squash these tailwinds, right? Like I said, the religious part, the cultural part, right? So how can we build immunity or resistance to come out of it? Because that's important. I mean, there has to be evidence to everything, right? So how can we do that?
So I've grown to learn a few things or two about life. Usually things get worse before they start getting better. So I believe that, if we continue with this part, things are going to get much, much worse before they start getting better. So I think we are at the precipice. Things will get worse if people continue following all these nonsense stuff. And I believe that has to happen for some sort of like a breakthrough. So it'll be like one big purge where people will say, what, we renounce all this nonsense influencers and now we really want to educate ourselves. It might happen in phases, but I believe that it's inevitable.
Does that mean that everyone should make an attempt to go and read PubMed and ResearchGate?
For your own sake, you should.
What are the best practices a layman should first make an attempt? Because that can be Latin and Greek for an average person, right? So,
look, if you just go use ChatGPT, there's a GPT called Consensus. It gives you a filtered out information. You're worried if the AI is kind of fooling around with you. You go and type on a Consensus GPT and it will give you factually correct, backed by science answers. You don't need me today. Today, you have all the answers on the AI, which pulls data from millions of research studies. Just integrate your Consensus on GPT, and then you have a very nuanced version of everything. The problem is, are you willing to look at a nuanced thing, and can you overlook your own personal biases and willing to give in to what the data is trying to tell you? Or you just want to follow what your heart tells you, in which case, hey, you never had a mind of a scholar to begin with. Which means that it's probably not for you, right? So if you have that scholar's mind and you want to improve your life for better, because see, this does not just apply to physical health. This inquisitiveness, the ability to look at the data and discern what's good for you, what's bad for you, applies to every single aspect of your life. The studies don't just pertain to health and fitness, they also pertain to your personal relationships, they also pertain to finances, they also pertain to social aspect. And I believe that everybody should be able to do that. It's very easy in today's time.
So with so much of AI coming, right, I'm sure as a company you are leveraging that in helping build better tools. Still a jarring data is we are the diabetic capital of the world. We have over 100 million people who are at the threshold of being diabetic or are diabetic. We have 135 million people who are obese. 14 million are kids out of it,
40
right?
million kids,
75, 60 million people have mental health issues, right? And this is after so much of distillation of information, so much of tools.
Yeah.
What are we still not getting right to come out of this epidemic? Because the root cause, we are still a struggling nation with root health crisis. So what are we still not getting right? Basics to help us get out of it.
So like I said, things sometimes have to get worse before they get better. And like you said, things are getting worse. At what point in human civilization people realize, hey, gambling is bad for us? Barring a few countries, almost everywhere gambling is illegal. And it's something which is looked down. Up until a few years, even doctors were telling, hey, wine is good for you because it has resveratrol, and resveratrol is like antioxidant and everything. Last year, WHO came out, Lancet published one of the largest studies and said, hey, almost 2/3 of the death, alcohol-related cancer deaths, they happen primarily because of light to moderate consumption of alcohol, and no amount of alcohol is safe for you, which means that, hey, the time has come for everybody to kind of uniformly denounce alcohol and smoking as absolute worse, right? So I'm saying it's just like how there's, like over a period of times we have realized that certain things are good for you, certain things are bad for you. We had all these sati pratha and all those things. People, when they practiced that, they felt that this was needed, right? And over a period of time, it changed. And similarly now, that's going to happen with alcohol and tobacco. I think after knowing all the information, after going through all the statistics, if you still smoke and if you still drink alcohol, you are an absolute idiot, right? You're not only doing disservice to your own self, you're doing a huge disservice to people around you, right? 66% people today in the world are dying of NCDs, non-communicable diseases. Today, our problems are not mosquitoes, our problems are not typhoid, dengue, or any sorts of respiratory illnesses. Today, our biggest problem is cancer and heart disease. Even people are not dying as much in road accidents. In future, we'll have AI cars which will prevent you from driving, right? So we are not dying of natural causes or accidental causes anymore. We are dying more because of the damage we are doing to ourselves, right? So the situation is going to get worse, and at some point of time, people will say, hey, enough is enough. There's going to be a big purge, and people say, you know what, I have to start taking care of my own health. Let me go and enroll for an education program. Let me learn the basics. I've already spent 10-15 lakhs over the last 5-10 years trying to, learn from all these fitness influencers. I only have lost money. Now let me educate myself, because how difficult could fitness be? And that's the thing. People just make it complex. It's not complex, it's easy.
So good time, that's a good segue for us to unpack the educator in you, help people understand basics. So I was trying to understand what are the things which I wanted to ask, and realize what I wanted to ask is a little more nuanced.
Sure.
But then I wanted to dial it down to understand, or to ask things which are more basics, which people perhaps ignore and underrated. So we'll make an attempt to, help them distill it in a very simpler way, which comes to you naturally, because I know you spend an hour every day doing that. So let this be a segue to get there. Help me explain, what is metabolism? What is metabolic health for a human being?
Whenever you eat any kind of food, the food at the end of the day produces some amount of energy. That's primarily why we eat food. Now, historically, and again, the universe designed it in a certain manner, that when we eat food, it tastes good. Because if it didn't taste good, humans would not be able to eat food, because they'd say, hey, you know what, I don't want to eat this because it does not taste good, even though it's good for me. I'm not going to eat this. They'll starve, right? So nature created fruits with a particular taste, and so we have taste buds, right? But that was not the primary reason for us eating food. The primary reason the fruits had taste, or any food had taste, so that we'd start consuming them, right? Today, that has changed, but let's not get into that. When you consume food, the food provides you energy, and we are all ATP-driven creatures, right? So food provides you certain macros and micronutrients, which get broken down into further substrates. So for example, carbs break down into glucose, fats break down into fatty acids, and then you have protein breaking down into amino acids, and the process of converting the food into, at the end of the day, ATP, using that energy to drive you, and using those building blocks to build your body up. This process This whole thing is referred to as metabolism.
What is macros and micros?
So the food that we consume, it has certain substrates, certain compounds, for example, fats, protein, and carbohydrates in larger quantities, and some nutrients in smaller quantities. So the nutrients that it contains in larger quantities like fats, protein, and carbohydrates, we refer to them as macronutrients. And the nutrients that it contains in smaller quantities like vitamins and minerals, we refer to them as micronutrients.
Does that mean macros is what we need more in composition than the micros?
Yes.
So what is metabolic health is established, how can one improve their metabolic health?
You can't improve your metabolic health per se. It's basically your body tightly regulates your metabolic health, and you can't focus or take a specific food or a compound or a chemical to improve your metabolic health, because your metabolic health is mostly an outcome of your overall lifestyle, right? So if you want to improve your metabolic health, just improve your health in general. And how do you do that? By playing sports, by being fitter, by being leaner, by lifting weights, by doing sprints, by eating right, by sleeping 8 hours, by keeping yourself stress-free, by having good interpersonal relationships, having a few friends, right? So that way you're keeping yourself healthy. When you keep yourself in good health, your metabolic health also gets better.
What's the difference between fat loss and weight loss? And I ask this because a lot of times it's interchangeably used. People are also confused. But in a simpler terms, what should be an ideal goal? So what's the difference and what should people strive as a goal?
Right. So, it's fine for people to use weight loss and fat loss interchangeably, as long as they understand that they want to lose fat, not weight. Because your weight is basically a combination of the weight of your bones, the weight of your muscles, the weight of your water, the weight of your glycogen mass, and the weight of your fat mass. Now, of all these things, everything else is desirable except for the fat part, right? So when we say you want to lose fat, you specifically want to lose your fat, not your muscles or glycogen or bone mineral density. Or
why proteins? And I ask this, a little more nuanced because the data says that in India, more than 50% of the population are deficient of proteins. Women in specific are almost 80% of the women are deficient of protein. Yeah. So why should one give more importance to protein as macros?
Right. So I think these stats might be even worse because there's a very poor threshold that we assign. We say, hey, if somebody is eating 30 grams of protein, they're protein sufficient, which is incorrect. Protein sufficiency is when you have had at least 1 gram per kg of body weight. Right? So I'd say these stats might be even worse. If you are talking about protein sufficiency, then I'd say maybe 1% of the population is actually getting adequate amount of protein. 99% people are not taking protein as per the body's needs. Protein is basically a building block, right? So we have these proteins, they convert into amino acids, and these 21 amino acids, they make different kinds of proteins in your body, right? So there's almost 20,000 plus different proteins. Proteins work as enzymes. Protein works as, they are also structures. So every cell basically is made up of protein, right? So including your nails, your hair, your bones, your muscle tissues, everything is made out of protein. So when people say, I'm taking biotin, biotin is basically a protein. When people say I need keratin, it's basically a protein. Collagen, again a protein. Elastin, a protein, right? Myosin, protein. So everything is made out of protein. And your body basically has this concept of cellular turnover, right? So for example, your body grows new cells, and then these cells, they go through a particular cycle specific to that particular organ or tissue, and then it dies, passes on the information to newer cells, right? And then your body lives on, right? So for example, your skin, you shed almost all of your body's skin in a week's time. So in every week, your body's skin changes, new cells come, right? Similarly, in about 8 to 12 months time, you're basically a new person, because every single cell that was once there has died, and now you are a new person because all those cells have died and new cells have come, right? And this process becomes over a period of time inefficient, largely because of course, lifestyle reasons, but largely because you're not taking sufficient amount of proteins.
Does it matter the timing of the protein?
In a very specific setting, very specific setting, and maybe
elaborate. What do you mean by specific setting?
So athletes.
Okay.
In a very specific setting, it might matter.
Okay.
But in general, most of the research has pointed out that it does not matter as much as the overall intake of protein matters.
And how much protein one should take is the common yardstick that it should be 1 gram or 1.5 gram of your body weight depending on the gender. Is that a typical, or does it also vary depending on the type or the lifestyle a person lives?
So ICMR guidelines are 1 gram per kg of body weight. So I'd say that, hey, it's a good enough guideline for somebody to start with. See, overall in a day's time, your body loses about there's a turnover of around 150 to 200 grams of amino acids on a per day basis. And this is the turnover, which means that you need a lot more protein. But I'm saying if people are not consuming 20 grams of protein, if they start consuming at least 1 gram per kg of body weight, which could be 70 grams, 80 grams, or even 100 grams, still better.
That's a starting point, you mean?
It's a starting point.
What do you mean by body composition of a person? And how can one figure it out what is an ideal body composition for them?
Right. So in body composition, you're basically referring to your bone mineral density, because you have bones, you have muscles, right? So you're referring to muscle mass. Then you have fat, so you're referring to fat mass. You have water, so you're referring to water mass. You also have organ weight, and you have visceral fat, so you're referring to visceral fat mass. Now, a body composition basically refers to what is the constituent weight of all of these components in your body, right? So you would want a higher bone mineral density because that prevents you against certain kinds of injuries and against sarcopenia, or let's say osteoarthritis, or any problems in the future, right? So you want like a higher bone mineral density is desirable. At the same time, high body fat percentage has been linked to numerous diseases, right? So you want a lower body fat percentage. Visceral fat is even worse than normal body fat percentage because it affects your organs, right? So you want an even lesser percentage of visceral fat, right? So this picture you can get either through a DEXA scan or just go to a gym. They typically use an impedance machine. It's also called a BC machine, body composition analysis. You go there, stand on the machine with electrodes, hold the electrodes, it'll give you a printout, and it will analyze how much body fat percentage you have, how much muscle mass you have, how much body water you have, right? So that's basically.
And does the ratio vary depending on the gender and the age?
Yes, yes.
So as you age, is there something more what you would need to have as a composition what you may not have as you were in your prime time?
I mean, there are generic guidelines, but there's a more leeway. As you age, the recommendations become more loose. For example, I would suggest, somebody between the 20s, 30s, 40s, or even 50s, 60s, 70s to stay below 10% body fat. But the guidelines are very loose, right? So they'd say, hey, if you're below 20%, it's fine.
When I started reading more about right format of eating, I was thrown different ways of how you can structure eating. Two of the most common was